Welcome to the Authentic Change Podcast. I'm Mike Horne, your host, and this podcast is for leaders and coaches who need and want fresh perspectives on what it means to live and to lead authentically. You're a leader who wants to make a difference, but sometimes you feel stuck. You know there's more to life and to leadership than what you're currently experiencing. It can be tough to figure out how to grow as a leader. You might be reading all the blogs and books, but it still feels like you're not making progress. You might even be feeling like you're doing everything wrong. On Authentic Change with Mike Horne, we interview experts who share their insights on how to live and lead authentically. Our guests are trendsetters in building great leaders, teams, and organizations. We provide fresh perspectives on what it means to live with purpose and authenticity. Welcome to this episode of the Authentic Change Podcast. Welcome to this episode of Authentic Change with Mike Horne. I am absolutely delighted to have in our virtual studio today a guest that I think everyone in our audience will connect with, whether you're a human resources professional or a research and development executive. All of us deal with the topic of conflict. And today we have an expert on this topic, and one of the remedies to conflict, or maybe that's how I see it. But without further ado, let me introduce Hesha Abrams. And Hesha Abrams is an internationally acclaimed master attorney, mediator, negotiator, and dealmaker who for 30 years is renowned for her success in resolving high-profile or difficult matters, including, if you can believe it, the secret recipe for Pepsi. So I want to dig into that and find out about that with Hesha Abrams, who also has a wonderful new book out called Holding the Calm, The Secret to Resolving Conflict and Defusing Tension. But let's say a little more about Hesha. She's worked with companies as large as Google, Amazon, Facebook, IBM, Verizon. Many of you are in the listening audience, and other large multinational companies, individual inventors. Welcome to all of our R&D leaders, and small businesses creating deals, solving cases. And I think what I learned from the press around Holding the Calm, The Secret to Resolving Conflict and Diffusing Tension, is that we can find ways to reduce our blood pressure, to get around some of our fears, or to deal with our fears around conflict. So Holding the Calm is really a wonderful resource if you need tools that actually work, and we can all benefit from the global experience that Hesha Abrams brings to us. So Hesha, welcome to Authentic Change. I'm so glad you're here. You want to say a few words?
My pleasure. Oh, no, this is great. And first of all, I want to thank our audience, because we're almost preaching to the choir. The people that need to be listening are the people that are not listening. So all of you listening, we hereby deputize you and give you these shiny silver 5-pointed star badges to go out into the world, and you can mop stuff up before it becomes ugly. You can prevent things, you can fix things, and have more joy and happiness in your own life along the way with just some simple little tricks. And that's what I want to talk with you about today.
Well, that's great. And I'll remind everyone that you'll learn more about Hesha Abrams. If you read today's show notes, you'll find all the ways to contact her, how to buy Holding the Calm, The Secret for Resolving Conflict and Diffusing Tension. You'll find links to her social media. So it's all in the show notes for today. And a little bit towards the end of the podcast, we'll have her describe some ways for you to get in touch with Hesha Abrams, again, an expert in mediation. What took you on this path? I mean, how did you decide you wanted to be an attorney first? And why is that a useful skill set for mediators?
Oh, my God, is it? And it's a useful set for everybody, because everyone needs to mediate a little bit. So I was a little girl and I was told I talk too much and I like to argue. And so therefore you're supposed to be a lawyer. Literally, that was the career path. But then, I was a trial lawyer. And in the space of 1 month, I won a case I should have lost, and I lost a case I should have won. And all of it had nothing to do with the facts. It had to do with the people and the psychology and the power dynamics. And it threw me into a crisis, of an existential crisis. How can this is not right. I'm being naive. This isn't how the world is supposed to be. And I heard about mediation. And back 35-ish, 38 years ago, when I started doing this, mediation wasn't a household word like it is now. It was sort of a touchy-feely thing, or it was something done with unions. It wasn't common or normal at all. And I met this woman that was a mediator, and I said, "Ooh, what's that?" And she told me a little bit about what she did. She did some, family law stuff. And I just said, wait a minute. You talk to people and solve problems for a living? Where do I sign up? And literally, I went to a federal judge that I knew, and I just won a case in his court. So I had some credibility. And I said, there's this newfangled thing called mediation. He goes, arbitration? And I said, no. Mediation. I have no power. I will make no decisions. It's a facilitated negotiation to try to help people get stuff done. Can I have 5 sort of junk cases, low level stuff? Let me try. And he gave me 5. I settled all 5. Now, in hindsight, I did a lot wrong, but I didn't know better at the time. Just the act of having a third party who has a give a darn meter turned on, that's half the battle. That's literally half the battle. And that's one of the reasons why I wrote this book, is that, now I only do big, huge things. So someone will come in and say, I want, $500 million. And the other side will go, here's 50,000, go away. And everybody is a fancy schmancy business person, business lawyer, smart. You're not going to say to somebody, oh, you're thinking about it wrong. Or let me school you. Or let me educate you how you're not approaching this the right way. Everyone, I'm assuming our listeners are laughing, because that's what people do. And it is completely a failure and rude and disrespectful and non-effective to boot. So how do I get those cases settled? With these psychological types of tools. Chapter 1 is speak into the ears that are hearing you. And we'll talk about that a little bit, because what we tend to do is do what works for us, which means that'll work with 10 or 15% of the people, which means you're going to have a 90% failure rate. That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? And it's really so simple. It's like I couldn't see well, and then I put on a pair of glasses and go, oh, holy cow, isn't this great? So that was my goal in doing this.
That's great. I know with my most recent book, my last book, Integrity by Design, Working and Living Authentically, Marshall Goldsmith provided endorsement. As I'm looking at Holding the Calm, as I picked it up, I saw that the foreword is by Ken Blanchard, one of our dear friends, and certainly instrumental in shaping how we think about leadership today. And so how does Ken relate to all of this work, Hesha? So many of our audience, will know Ken's work, and certainly have benefited from situational leadership and all the subsequent work he did.
Well, over the many, many years, I have done a little bit of work for the Blanchard companies, and I know some of the major players there. And Ken is just a unique human being on this earth. I mean, the man just is. He's an urban prophet. He's just really marvelous. And so I sent him the book, not to ask him to write a foreword, really, but just to read it and give me thoughts, and then, hoping maybe he would want to write a foreword. And he loved it. And there's one particular chapter in there about most of our listeners.
Ken sets a high bar.
Oh, yes. I have a chapter in there where, did you know that we have a division of psychological operations in the U.S. military?
Yes.
Yep. It's very interesting. Yeah. Trying to win wars, not with battles and bullets, but with human psychology. And I became very good friends with the colonel in charge of that. And we would share stories. And he told me a story of something he had done during the Serbian conflict, years ago. And I had to get his permission. I had to go up through the JAG Corps to be able to share it. Ken loved that story. And, because one of the things I did in the book is I am not a kumbaya person. I was when I was younger. And then, you get smacked in the face enough times, you can't be utopian about how things should be. You have to see things as they are and work with what you got. And I think that's why I'm so successful. And I wanted to write a book about that. not about how you should treat your idiot brother-in-law at Thanksgiving, but how you can treat him within the bounds of what you can do. A boss, a colleague, a client, a customer. How do you handle in real life stuff, not the namby-pamby, let's all be nice and listen to each other stuff.
Well, let's break it down, or break it down for us, Hesha Abrams. I mean, what is mediation after all?
Mediation is a negotiated settlement with a third party, somebody who will listen to both sides, who has confidentiality, and is willing to try to be a deal maker. And there's a range in mediation. There's some mediators that are very facilitative. They never give an opinion at all whatsoever. They just facilitate a conversation. And then there's some that are very assertive and very deal maker and say, yes, no, right, wrong, I agree, I disagree. And there's a spectrum across the base of it. And in my field, people talk about that. Well, which side are you on? And I always say, all of it. You're all of it. You speak into the ears that are hearing you. With people that need you to be directive, you're directive. With people that need you to be facilitative, you're facilitative. You serve what people need.
This is certainly more than how to find a mediator. But I think what you're bringing to the world and our audience are tools, techniques, approaches, processes, so that people can bring some of these tools into their own everyday lives. Is that right?
Indeed. Absolutely true. Because look, I may do some $500 million case, and late at night with the executives, you know what we're talking about? Their idiot sister-in-law or the coach that is doing something on their kids' lacrosse team. They're talking about personal issues, and they're asking me, how do I handle that? Or what can I say and do? So even though experts in whatever field you're in, we all have egos, and we as human beings tend to play bumper car egos. So when I'm really calm and relaxed and not under any stress, or my amygdala is not triggered, sure, you can do things. But what happens when that amygdala is triggered? When you're on a short time frame, when you're hungry, when you're angry, when you're cranky, when you feel powerless, that's when all of our tools just disappear. And we do whatever we saw our mom and dad do. And that usually wasn't very effective. So that's why I wanted to do this, because people, yes, you can use this in your business life for sure. But the real beneficiaries is you and your personal life. And you get plenty of chances to practice it in this laboratory we call life, because junk is going to keep coming at you. That's just the nature of the sandstorm that we live in.
And how serious does a conflict have to be, or for it to be considered for a mediative approach? Is that a right word?
You could. So let me give you an analogy, because it's a great question. And I'm a believer is early in the process. And this is my analogy. Spaghetti sauce. You drop it on the counter. You take a wet sponge, you wipe it right up. It's no big deal. You leave it overnight. You're scraping it off with a knife. You leave it 3 or 4 months or 3 or 4 years. It's really old and moldy and nasty, right? That, my friends, is conflict. And that's why I called the book, it's a little longer title than I would have liked, Holding the Calm, The Secret to Resolving Conflict and Diffusing Tension. That's kind of a mouthful. But I did it that way on purpose, because 100% of conflict, 100% of it starts with tension. And the tension can be, or it could be, That's just as bad. And so the question is, why don't we wipe it up when it's wet? Like, we all know that this is true. Well, we're afraid. We don't know how. We're hoping it'll go away. And I swear to you, it never goes away. Saved like a squirrel saving nuts for the winter. And it always circles around at the worst and most inappropriate times. Always. Even if it's 20 years later, someone will go, what? Huh? What? So how do we do that? And so in real life, I talk about holding the calm so you can do it yourself. But to answer your specific question about mediation, smart lawyers and smart companies mediate early, even before a lawsuit is filed or a grievance or a union. Early. It's free discovery. I want to know the lay of the land. I don't want to find out from 3 levels of lawyers. By the time it gets to me, it's like the game of telephone. You don't really know what's happening. I want to sit across the table from someone. And nowadays with Zoom, it's just even easier. And I want to suss out, is this a wet spaghetti sauce that I can take care of easily and quickly? Is this more of a problem? Will it become a problem? How can I minimize the damage? It is the cheapest, easiest thing you can do right away. And lawyers are not trained to do that. Lawyers are trained to investigate it, to have discovery, to figure out what's going on before they engage in, quote, settlement talks.
Right.
Call it settlement talks. You call it anything you want, getting together. Let me listen to you. Let me hear what it is you have to say. And I'm not going to argue with you because you have never argued anyone into a deal, ever. So I want to know what am I dealing with? And smart lawyers and smart in-house counsel do that. Now, for a very little expenditure of money, now they've got data, they've got information, and they can decide, do we want to try to deal with this? Or are we going to buckle up for a long-term fight? Okay, either one. We're not Pollyanna here, either one, but do it on good data. Don't do it because you didn't investigate at first. And I can't tell you the number of cases I have where people say, had I known, I would have done something else. Well, mediation is the greatest thing. Hire a mediator, sit down early. And then lawyers and sometimes people will say, well, it's perceived sign of weakness because they think we'll want to settle. That's so easily taken care of. You basically just say, look, my client doesn't understand your case. If you got something here, I want to talk to you about it. If you don't, we're going to fight you till kingdom comes. But let me at least understand what we got. Everybody comes to that good. Everybody comes to that with respect.
And I love the word choices that you used in the title. Holding, resolving, diffusing. Those all have really different kinds of meanings, perhaps, and subtleties. They're powerful words. To hold a conflict, or you call it holding the calm. Mm-hmm. But how did you come with those word choices? They're so interesting. Holding, resolving, diffusing.
Thank you for noticing that. That's very validating to me as an author because I worked hard on that. It had a different name at first, and my publisher actually asked me. He says, "Why are you good at what you do?" And I used a bunch of words, my skills, whatever. And he goes, no. Why are you good at what you do? And he said, go home and tell me that in a sentence. And I really sat and played with it. And I realized what I do is I hold the calm. That's what I do. Now, I can hold the calm intensely and aggressively, if that's what the people need. I can hold the calm quietly, gently, kindly, if that's what the people need. So it's somebody else whose give a darn meter is turned on, who's got some skills and can help, because when people are in conflict, their amygdala is triggered. And when your amygdala is triggered, your prefrontal cortex behind your forehead, it's not operating, it goes dark. So I wanted to do that. And then what's the essence of that? Really, you want to diffuse tension and then hopefully resolve conflict. But so often cases come to me when they're already old and moldy and nasty. Mm-hmm. And I get it done, but it's a lot harder. And my favorites are when clients come real early and we can diffuse things. We can get things done where no lawsuits ever filed. And things are, I have a story in the book where I talk about how an apology, who settles, after you get to a lawyer, who settles a case with an apology? That's ridiculous. Apology and a little tiny bit of money? Yeah, did the trick, because you don't know the problem you're solving until you get in there and take a look and don't argue and listen and hear. Now you've got data. Now you can evaluate.
Let's take this to the authentic journey, the authentic leadership journey. When I hear the words holding the calm, which are so attractive, it seems to convey a sense of personal authority. Is that present? What's present? What are the qualities of mediator that cause people to seek you out again and again and again, Hesha Abrams?
I love that question, because the segue is about power and powerlessness. So I have a theory that all conflict comes from feeling powerless. Either I'm trying to make you do something you don't want to do, or you're trying to make me do something, or believe something, or take something, or stop something. So it's all about power. And so what happens when you get into that, your amygdala gets triggered. And in that sense of powerlessness, you're not thinking so clear. But and it's a little trick I do for myself. When my amygdala is triggered, because I'm human, I've got a bumper car ego like everyone else, I will literally say to myself, I'm holding the calm, I'm holding the calm, I'm holding the calm. That takes 2 seconds. And it's so much more effective than take a deep breath or calm down. All of those are words, like police officers are trained not to say calm down. It's like putting oil on a fire. It's the worst thing you can do. So the question is, why? Because the person is already feeling powerless. And what you're saying to them is, yeah, you are powerless, and I've got the power, and I'm going to tell you what to do. It just makes it worse. But when you say, I am holding the calm, where's the power? I'm saying to my amygdala, you are not powerless. You have choices. You have options. Now, what are we going to do? It's subtle, but that's how neuroscience works. The brain doesn't work with big, huge, giant inputs. The brain works with tiny, tiny, tiny little inputs. And being able to calm yourself down or calm somebody else down by giving them power, oh, it's a fantastic technique. I mean, if you're in a tense situation with somebody, the first thing I do is give away power. Even if it's simple stuff like, what time do you want to start? Where do you want to sit? What issues are most important to you? When do you want to break for lunch? Where do you want to eat? Who do you think should be in attendance? Think how simple and subtle that stuff is. It means nothing. And people have a tendency to say, well, they'll think I'm weak unless I know everything. It honestly is ineffective the other way, unless you really, really, really do have power and the other person really, really, really doesn't and can't come back at you. And you choose what I call Russian negotiating, which is just an aggressive, okay, honestly, that's a choice. There are times when poking someone in the eye with a sharp stick is an effective strategy. Okay, but think it through as a strategy. Think 3 steps ahead. What will happen if I do this and they do that?
I love the concepts of power that come into play here. And often one of the considerations that I bring to my work are 2 concepts. One is, do you want power over or power with?
That's
and
good.
And the other concept is, do you see power as a divisible pie or do you see it as an expandable pie?
Very good.
And as you're working with these concepts of power, because people are often wondering, well, who's going to win out of this in some ways, I think. Yet you have to enter mediation almost with a different mindset, don't you? I mean, you have to enter it with a power with and the power as an expandable pie. Is that right? Or
Well,
what are the entry stages?
yeah, see, this gets into if you're dealing with rational, nice, reasonable, cooperative human beings, absolutely, that is the way to go. But what if you're not? That's why I want to talk about, yes, if it's that way, yes, that's what you do. But most often, you are not dealing with that. You are dealing with people that have scarcity mentality, narrow pies. If you want it, I don't. Fear of loss is more prevalent than wanting to win. One of the huge human psychological factors that run in any deal is what I call the schmo factor. Nobody wants to be the schmo that agreed to that. So you're going to be extra protective and less cooperative because you don't know the ramifications of what's just going to happen. So there's a lot of that subtle kind of stuff. And I operate in that space. When everyone wants to be reasonable, they like each other, they're highly emotional maturity, they've got a good skill set. Honestly, I never get those cases.
Right. Yeah, I was wondering about that.
It never happens. I would like for it to happen, but you don't really have to pay somebody to sit with you if you've got 2 people that are in that place. You sit down, you talk to each other, you use all these nice skills everyone has, and you work it out. And that's 10% of the time? Okay, let's say 20% of the time. What do you do with the other 80%? With people with varying emotional immaturity, skill sets, power, lack of creativity, that kind of stuff. And it's very interesting. And that's why in the land of mediation, having a third party who can help is just very helpful. And the cost is nothing. I mean, it's not a big deal at all. But then I don't want to limit it to mediation, because all of these skills and techniques work in one-on-one. They work in groups. I settled a huge case in a gigantic community in Texas that was trying to teach Bible in the public schools. And they had a former Baptist minister as the teacher, and the community erupted. The ACLU got involved. There was a lawsuit. Oh, it was ripping the community apart. And I went down there for a week and settled the whole thing. So the techniques that I'm teaching, they're designed to work with human beings. So it can be one-on-one, three-on-one, one as a mediator with two. It's just human being. How do we get the amygdala to settle down so that some thinking can take place? Because no one's analyzing data or information when the amygdala is triggered. So it's called a refractory state in neuroscience, and not happening. So how do we shift it? And can I give you a funny little analogy that
That'd be great.
So apples, 25 cents each. How many would you buy? I don't know. I like apples. I'd buy 2 apples, 4 for $1, 35% boost in sales. Now, that's just stupid. Makes no logical sense at all. And if you want more, say limit 2 and you get an extra 10% boost in sales. That's crazy town. It makes no sense. And it works across genders, ethnicities, ages, cultures, backgrounds of all kind. It's the human being piece of how our brain thinks. And so once you can look at how do I speak into the ears that are hearing me, okay, it's almost like me saying, I like ice cream. Mike, what the hell is wrong with you? You don't like ice cream? Everyone likes ice cream. Let me convince you to like ice cream without ever finding out that you're lactose intolerant or pizza, gluten-free. It's just so easy to eventually figure out and then go, oh, that's why you don't want it. Now, I don't have to agree with you, but at least I can understand. Now, okay, switch gears. How can we do something else?
What state of mind do I need to be into to be ready for mediation? The reason I think about this is many of my clients, people that I work with, are often the smartest people at the table. They're distinguished scientists, engineers. Yeah. And I believe that many of them silently think to themselves, what a moron, what an idiot that person is. Sometimes when they get into trouble, when they vocally express that. But when do smart people be ready to enter a mediation or this mediation state?
So let me say something to all of our listeners who think, oh my God, that's me. That's me. And Mike, that's probably you. Okay? If anyone says in real life that they don't think, oh my God, what an idiot, they're lying, either to themselves or outright.
Correct. Yeah.
So it's not that you don't think that. It may be true and completely irrelevant. And here's my proof. You're in the grocery store and you got a 3-year-old screaming and yelling for candy and hanging onto your pants leg. That 3-year-old has no power. You have all the power. You're much smarter, much more capable. But you still got to deal with the situation. So logicating and rationalizing and using your superior brain with that 3-year-old isn't going to get you anything, right? So understanding that you need to either get out of jail card, you need to extricate yourself from something, you need to make something happen. Brains are only valuable toward the strategy. And the strategy is good, but that's just one leg of the 3-legged stool. You've got to understand the ears you're speaking into, and you have to be able to have some of the strategies and techniques to diffuse that particular bomb. not the bomb that was last week, but this week's. And when you look at somebody and think, oh my God, you're an idiot, you could be 100% right, and it will harm your ability to actually get something done with them. And so and it's usually not the idiot part. It's usually somebody feeling like, I hate you. Like, you are awful. You are harming me. I can't get away from you. I mean, there's a lot of that stuff too. So I have a little trick. Would our listeners like to have a little trick of how to handle that?
Absolutely.
So let's say you're one of these big brain people and you're in a situation and everyone's just an idiot. And if you have to say it again one more time, you think you're going to swallow your tongue. Like, oh, for God's sakes. And then the person who's the loudest voice is often the stupidest and most aggressive. So look at them and ask yourself one question. Would they pull my kid out of a burning car? 95% of the time, the answer will be yes. Now, all of a sudden, you look at them a little bit differently. And then I've got a whole chapter in there called Zoo Animals, where how you look at somebody and how they're behaving and acting, it changes the power dynamic for you. Because when you talk to somebody in a way that you think they're stupid, they're not very likely to agree to anything or cooperate with you.
Oh, good point.
And so how do you do this when you have to get your own ego and your own frustration out of the way? Read that chapter in the book on Zoo Animals, everybody. You're going to love it. And I use it all the time. I mean, I get in cases where people behave badly, really badly. And it doesn't mean they're a bad person. Sometimes it does, but 95% of the time it doesn't. It just means they don't have as developed a skill set as I would like. And they don't have a lot of choices. And the Maslow thing about if all you have is a hammer, all you see are nails. Okay, so in that encounter, who will be more powerful? Who will be more skillful? Me. I choose that. And if you're smart enough to think that somebody else is stupid and be right, then you're smart enough to say, okay, I've been using a hammer here. I'm going to start using a Phillips head.
Yeah, I often think about one of my mentors was a patient of Abe Maslow's and a client of Abe Maslow's. And it was never really about time heals all wounds, but, time wounds all heals. And I often think about, we're going to have many people in our audience who are curious about how do I bring these mediation practices into my organization? Can they purchase training from you? Do you come and give a speech or talk to a group of people in organizations? How's that all work, Hesha Abrams?
Thank you for it, because yes, of course I do. And I also, if you need, the big guns, you bring me in. But I also know that people have tight training budgets, and I want this information out. So in the back of the book, I put a training guide, and it tracks the book question to question. And so you can get continuing legal credit for it, continuing education credit, whatever that continuing education credit, you can apply for that and get it in your whatever state organization you have. And the reason why it's good is that you get 10 people or 50 or 100, and somebody just facilitates the questions, and you do, 3, 4, it's only 20 chapters in the book. The whole thing is designed to be read in 2 hours. So you can divide it up over 1 week, 4 weeks, whatever you want to do. And then everyone has the assignment to read those chapters, and then you discuss those questions. And what will happen is somebody will say, oh, that was so meaningful to me. And someone else will say, I thought it was stupid. I didn't understand it at all. How could that possibly work? I just think that's ridiculous. That's when real training happens. Real listening, real understanding. And the ancillary benefit is it creates team building within that group, because it's real. It's not fake, let's walk across a bridge thing. It's, real team building. So yes, people can bring me in. I do speeches and keynotes, and trainings all the time. And I'm happy to. My information will be in the show notes, at holdingthecalm.com. But I also wanted to put something in there to make it easy and free for people that don't have a budget and can't do it. And okay, let them DIY it,
Yeah, so I think for everyone in our audience, if you're concerned about how do you stop conflict, how do you find solutions, how do you handle people who are yelling, how do you settle disputes better, take a look at holdingthecalm.com, which is the title of the book we've been discussing by Hesha Abrams today, with forewords by Clint Blanchard and Colonel Mark Flitton, and gain some insights. And I think what really resonates with me is the practicality of all of this. This isn't pie in the sky or something ethereal, but these are actionable strategies and approaches that everyone can take to make life better for themselves and for the people in their teams and organizations. So, Hesha Abrams, if you were to give people a last word, if you were to have the last word with our audience about sharing some insight or sharing some wisdom or setting a goal for them, what would that be?
What a lovely question. I have, this is a little inspirational, but my husband has a friend who's a Navy SEAL. And, you know, Navy SEALs are supposed to learn how to tread water until they can die. So my husband said to him, "So how long can you tread water?" He said, "I don't know. I'm not dead yet."
Oh my gosh.
I love
It's the
that.
scariest thing when you watch videos of the SEALs like in that state. I mean,
Isn't it? I know. But I think about that for us. How skillful can I get? How big can I get? How much, you know, if I want to be more loving or more forgiving or more aggressive or more entrepreneurial or more assertive, how much more can I get? And, you know, I think the day you're perfect is probably the day you're going to die. So you may as well keep going all the way until that point. And then life becomes very meaningful and very rich. And that's really the message I send to people is don't look at this as it's too hard or it's too difficult or I don't know how. Pick one thing. Go into the book, pick one technique. I mean, I can tell you ones I like, but it's so unique to you. Pick one and just play with it. Just play with it. And then when it works, you're going to say, holy cow, gosh darn, look at that. That was great. And then pick a second one. And that's how in a couple of years you write me and say, oh my God, look what happened. This is so great.
I appreciate your enthusiasm and how you are centered at helping all of us to bring the best of who we are and to make the best of all of our situations. I love some of your wrap-up comments around life. What I always remind clients is that this isn't a science experiment that we're engaged in, but rather what we're trying to do through coaching is to be experimental with our approaches. And I love the many avenues and opportunities that you're providing to folks to say, hey, let's get on with this. Let's think about mediation. And so many great ideas at holdingthecalm.com. Once again, Hesha Abrams, it's just been a delight. I encourage all of our audience to visit you, to look at the show notes. And once again, I want to thank Hesha Abrams for being a guest today on Authentic Change with Mike Horne.
I appreciate it, Mike. It's been a pleasure. And any of your listeners want to connect with me on LinkedIn, I'd love it. Amazon comments are always very much appreciated.
You'll find it all in the show notes, the link to the book, Hesha Abrams' LinkedIn. So until the next episode of Authentic Change with Mike Horne, stay well, everyone. Thank you for listening to the Authentic Change podcast. I'm delighted that you've tuned in to listen. Please visit the show notes for links to topics discussed in today's podcast. To download a free ebook on authentic change and leadership and to subscribe to my newsletter, please visit mike-horne.com. Once again, mike-horne.com, mike-horne.com. Once again, thank you for listening to the Authentic Change podcast.